Oh man, this segment is going to start with me having like coughed my lungs up on mute and then come in my throat raw. Anywho, Djokovic, he got out Djokovic is really what it comes down to. Medvedev played some of the best tennis of his life. He was serving hard in different spots, hitting it all accurately. Djokovic had no clue how to return it, and that just put him at with such a gap to start off. And then there was no weakness for him to attack in Medvedev's game. He did it all. His shots were accurate. He would paint line 3-4 times in the same rally. Djokovic couldn't get him with drop shots, backhands, forehands. Medvedev had an answer for it all. And then on top of all that, the nerves were there for Djokovic, getting broken early in the first set and the second set, getting broken twice early in the third set. He had no answer for it the entire match. The nerves got to Medvedev at the end there when the crowd kind of got past the umpire's control and was cheering the entire time he was serving. The double faults really racked up there, and it looked like there might be space for Djokovic to pull it off, but getting his first break of the match there on Medvedev's first chance for the championship. But then the second time, despite another double fault, Djokovic just wasn't able to do it on Medvedev's first serve. And Medvedev ultimately came through. He wins his first Grand Slam ever and becomes the first player of the modern era of this next generation. I really think of Zverev, Tsitsipas, and of course Medvedev as kind of the new generation of tennis athletes. They all have very similar frames, crazy powerful serves. I guess you could add Berrettini into there, though his game is not quite as well-rounded as those other three. But of that generation, he becomes the first to beat one of the big three in a Grand Slam final. And it raises the question of, is a new era of tennis coming? Because if you watch Djokovic's match with Zverev, which was an amazing match, by the way, that was the one circled on my calendar, as I said at the start of this Open, as the one to watch for. And 5 sets of back and forth, amazing tennis. It peaked for me in the third set. I think it was a Zverev service game that saw like a 53 shot rally that Zverev ultimately took, although Djokovic came back and took that game, which was huge for the momentum of the match. But anyway, in that match, when Zverev played his best tennis, Djokovic didn't have an answer for it, much like Medvedev and him today. Just Medvedev was able to stay more consistent, not break down with the double faults, the unforced errors in big moments or big stretches, and presented no holes for Djokovic. So we've been saying that sometimes it looks like Novak is playing the best tennis of his career, despite his relatively advanced age, just from the experience, the mental composure, more than making up for the loss of athleticism. But as this next generation comes up and they've taken their hits and licked their wounds against the big three in those huge moments, and they've come back more resilient, they still have that athleticism. You have to ask, is the moment shifting? Because we saw with Medvedev, he's lost to Djokovic before in these finals. This time he had the composure, the resiliency gained through those losses. You've got to think Zverev going to the semis in the French, having a decent Wimbledon run, winning Olympic gold, having the match he just had against Djokovic, you've got to think that same mental resiliency is almost there. Matteo Berrettini, maybe one of the biggest what ifs on this Grand Slam season, losing to Djokovic 3 times. All these guys, the mental composure that Djokovic, Nadal, Federer have, they're going to have it sooner rather than later. And as the athleticism wanes for the big three, for Federer, well past the point, most likely by now, and he has no shot. But I think we're going to maybe put a definitive end to the era of the big three very soon. We've got the Australian in January. Djokovic is to win, in theory, if the big three era is still going. Of course, the French, Nadal's chance, and then Wimbledon, which was probably Djokovic's most easy Grand Slam of the three that he won, the one with just the least bumps in the road. Although Berrettini is going to be a monster come that next Wimbledon, next grass season. He's probably hates that it's so short. This could be it. The era could be over, which it sounds like such a crazy fast turnaround 180 to say right after Djokovic comes one game off making tennis history and stamping his name as the GOAT beyond all dispute. He still is in my books and a lot of people, but he'd have to go win like 3 or 4 more Grand Slams to put it past the point of dispute that a Grand Slam calendar year would have done, I think. So the future of tennis, really fascinating. Of course, our Canadians have had a pretty good run, both Felix and Dennis making Grand Slam semis at the past 2. Can't wait to see that surge continue. Layla making the finals. I don't know if you have anything to say on any of that, but for me, that's the question of this moment right now. Like, is this the passing of the guard?
I would say for 2 out of those 3 that it is apparent that there is a transition period happening. Nadal had a great showing at this year's French Open, but at a certain point, him and Federer, the amount of injuries, the amount of time taken off has really added up. And at a certain point, like, these guys have played at such a top tier level at their current age. It's really impressive. But like anyone, Father Time eventually catches up to you. And so with them, it's going to be tough. I'm sure each of them has one last ride left in them, but their careers may come to a unsatisfying end for a lot of hardcore tennis fans, just because they won't be able to have that send-off tournament, I don't believe. And they might just fall out of the picture, similar to like what we've seen with Andy Murray, where he still continues to play, but he's just nowhere near the level he used to be. With Djokovic, he is very much still in the picture. All he just did was lose in the finals of a Grand Slam that he almost won to complete the calendar year Grand Slam, right? It's very easy to say, oh, this is the end of an era, but we're still in his era. And he's a little bit latent compared to Federer and Nadal. He's about 3 or 4 years later behind them in his trajectory. So he's still in that late stages of his prime. So I would say it's the end of that big 3 or even that big 4 if you included Murray at the time. But as of right now, Djokovic is still the man to beat at every event. I don't think that's going to change until we truly see a shift from him, or it could be an injury. But yeah, totally his time still and you got to take the crown from him.
Yeah, he's not going to give up before he is forced to, if he's still tied for record most Grand Slams won. And Nadal, it's such an interesting one because, yeah, he's almost certainly not going to win the Australian, Wimbledon, the US Open. But the French, like, he only lost to Djokovic on clay. So until we see him losing consistently at the French, like, it's going to take, I think, 2 more losses before he's written out, unless, of course, injuries step in the way. And I'm sure that has something to do with his conditioning. But if he can go win the French and Djokovic wins like 1 more, then he's going to be like, come on, man, I have to go another year and try and win 2 just in case Nadal takes a French the year after that. So much excitement in the world of tennis ahead. The sport is just in a fantastic place right now, I feel like.
Yeah, and let's not forget, like, we instantly turn to the Grand Slam events, but something that has, I think, grown in popularity the last couple of years are the ATP finals that take place in Dubai in the winter months. That's a high level tournament. That basically takes the 8 best players in both the men's and women's and pits them in a tournament. And that's just consistently high level tennis. You're going to get the best on best. So let's not overlook that. That's going to be a great period of time as well to enjoy some high level tennis.